Support comes from Thomas Nelson Community College, now becoming Virginia Peninsula Community College, the first choice to start a bachelor's degree since tuition is one-third the cost of four-year schools. More at tncc.edu.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. The voters have spoken, the results are in, and Republican Glenn Youngkin will be sworn in as the 74th governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. All eyes were on this gubernatorial race as a harbinger to come for the congressional midterm elections and the next presidential election. But what does the outcome mean for the Commonwealth? Analysis of the 2021 Virginia elections with Dr. Eric Claville and Dr. Wil LaVeist. Stay tuned. Another View will be right back after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRV News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. So guess what? This week, something special happened to me. The tables were turned, and I actually was sitting on the other side of the microphone. I was the guest on a podcast called Mind Your Business with J.B. Harrison. And he is a fabulous interviewer. He makes you feel very, very comfortable. And we had a great time for an hour talking about owning your own business and talking about working in the community and all kinds of things that are going on. So he's out of Williamsburg. You guys can check it out. It's on YouTube, and it's called Mind Your Business. So I am episode number 27. And thank you, JB. I really enjoyed my time spending time with you. I appreciate that very, very much. So let's get right to it. What happened on Tuesday? Let's get right to the analysis of the Virginia 2021 elections. Our guests are no strangers to Another View. Dr. Eric Claville is a political analyst, public policy expert, and the director of the Center for African American Public Policy at Norfolk State University. And he is here in the studio. Eric, we haven't seen each other in 2 years.
Yes, it has been that long.
It is good to see you in person.
Absolutely. And glad to be back on air.
Thank you so much for joining us. And also, Dr. Wil LaVeist. He's an author, journalist, political pundit, and media consultant. And he's joining us by phone from Philadelphia. Hello, Dr. Wil. How are you?
Hey, Barbara. Always a pleasure, and I'm jealous that I can't be there. And Eric gets to soak up all your glory.
Well, thank you very much. But we miss you. Absolutely. So, Eric, I got to ask you, you predicted on Another View a couple years ago now that Donald Trump was going to win the presidency. Did you predict that Glenn Youngkin was going to be governor?
Yes.
You did. When and where? And what made you think that?
Sure. So election night, we were in studio both at Wavy TV 10 and also WTKR, and talking with the anchors before we went on air, of course, asking, who's going to win this thing. So in talking with Andy Fox and, of course, Dr. Molesky from ODU was there, I said, listen, Glenn Youngkin is going to win this campaign. It's going to be within that 1 to 2% percentage margin of error, between 50 and 60,000 votes over the course of the last several weeks. And also told, in talking with WTKR news anchor Kurt Williams, while we were before going on air, I advised him the same thing, along with Dr. Jesse Richmond, who was a colleague. We were on air together on that channel.
From ODU, right?
Yes, ODU as well. So why did I think that? Again, looking at the polls, of course, we'll talk more about how that lead started to shrink for Terry McCullough with that 9 to 10 percentage points, and also the ground campaign. I'm a grassroots organizing guy. That's how I started out years ago as an idealistic college student, knocking on doors, want to change the world one door at a time. And grassroots never fails. And when the Youngkin campaign was able to gravitate and create a grassroots campaign out of the education messaging, we'll get into more what that messaging was, that parents matters, grassroots organizing. That's what turned the tables in the suburban areas with white women who split the vote in their homes during the time of voting for Joe Biden and Donald Trump, where more than likely the male voted for Trump, according to the polls, and the woman voted for Biden, according to the polls. In this situation, you had two parents that voted for Youngkin around that Parents Matters messaging grassroots. The McCullough campaign brought in big names, big surrogates, but those rallies did not attract the number of people that they normally would have. The Obama rally, the Joe Biden rally, and also the Vice President Harris rally. They just didn't attract the numbers that it usually would. And we'll talk about more the lack of excitement on the Democratic side, again, because of moving from bread and butter of the Democratic Party, grassroots organizing, grassroots campaigning, grassroots voter registration. And then how do you galvanize voters around early voting, which is now 45 days, right? From September 17th to Election Day. That's a great thing, but it's also another challenge, but again, a good problem to have.
So, Will, watching it from the outside, if you will, from another state, what was your take on what you were seeing happening, and what were people talking to you about?
Deja vu all over again is the famous quote by Yogi Berra. I mean, it's like the Democrats continue to not learn from past mistakes and continue to run, these dry campaigns, these arrogant, you know who I am, vote for me type campaigns. I don't know how guys like Eric continue to do it, continue to watch the same stuff over and over and over again, shake their heads and like, well, why aren't you learning from this? So you're bringing up a candidate, a retread candidate in this thing, and asking them to do the impossible. I mean, when was the last time a governor in Virginia that had been governor previously would come back later and become governor again?
I think it was only
when
once.
I heard that
one time. Yeah, only one time.
It was like 1960, and that guy, I forget his name. Eric,
Godwin.
You guys, I mean, he switched parties to do it.
Right.
So, so you're asking someone who is already part of the failed or passe Clinton mindset in terms of Democratic politics to do the impossible. And again, and see how close the race was, which in my mind, as an outsider and someone who was there, covered elections when I was at the Daily Press and over at the Pilot with Mixed Magazine, if you energize your own people as Democrats, it's highly likely you're going to win the race because the numbers are there in your favor. So here the Democrats run another, again, tone deaf, not grassroots like Eric is saying, campaign, and see how close the race was.
Yeah.
And they lost. So what does that tell you? If you run an exciting, engaging, really thoughtful campaign, you really should run the tape. And continue to not learn from past mistakes.
You and Eric both, Eric and I in conversation prior to us coming on the air, and now, Will, you just used the same word, and my husband has also used the same word. You guys have all said the word arrogant. Eric, go into that a little bit. What do you mean by that when you say that?
Well, again, it goes back to grassroots, right? Now, keep in mind, the McCullough campaign did everything that they felt they needed to do based upon the numbers that they had. And they had a 9-10% comfortable lead. So it's no slight to that because they were up. But after the messaging, after the last debate around education and the Youngkin campaign being able to create a messaging program, a grassroots messaging program around education. Now, of course, there were some dog whistles in there about race, about Black teaching the full American history, right? Which is terrible part of our American history, which is slavery. So that was in there. That was a dog whistle that was there.
Yes, he said on day one he's going to stop teaching critical race theory, but critical race theory is not taught in Virginia public schools. Let's make that clear.
But again, as a campaign, that's all a political stump speech stuff. So he has to do that, even though it would have no effect. It'll be null and void because it's not taught as you stated. So I get it. It's kind of like when President Bush said that he would make an amendment, I think, to I think it was marriage, and basically like flopped immediately, or and the Republicans, I never forget this. Mitch McConnell, when they ran on repeal and replace, remember that?
Yes.
Repeal and replace. In less than 24 hours after they won and got control back of the Senate, he said, we're not interested in it. We're going to do something else. I mean, I remember that press conference to this day. It was so funny, but at the same time, it showed you do what you got to do to get elected. All's where in war, love, and politics. But the part with the McCullough piece is that it was just a failure to really make that hard turn and go grassroots. And not going grassroots early enough was really also something that affected them.
So when I went to bed, Will, on Tuesday evening, I actually went to bed with trepidation. Because it was clear that at that point, even though the race had not been called, it was clear that the parties were going to be changing, and that the government of the Commonwealth of Virginia was going to be changing. But I guess my question is, do we expect that Youngkin will follow? He says that his whole thing is. I was trying to look for the specifics that he talked about, that he says he's going to create 400,000 new jobs, launch 10,000 new small businesses, replace the Virginia Parole Board, roll out the largest public education budget in Virginia's history, create 20 new charter schools, and begin a school choice program. That's on his day one agenda.
Right.
So do we think that, well, let me get you and then I'll come to you, Eric. Do we think that A, he will stick to that? And B, can he accomplish those things?
Well, as for me, as an independent, a proud independent,
who was mostly Democrat.
Really, I went to bed sleeping pretty well, because I was thinking, again, this is what needs to happen, and maybe this will be a good thing. Democrats will finally wake up and move forward and pull up their sleeves and do campaigns in a way that's about generating passion. And so to Eric's point about making statements that you're likely to move away from, I think that all politicians tend to do that. They tend to run on change, or they run on their experience, and that's why you're supposed to vote for me. But he has this agenda. He's not the king of the state of Virginia. He's not going to just be able to decree that these things will happen. So he's going to have folks within his own party as well as folks in the other party. He's going to have the people who are going to speak out and make their voices known of what they want and what they don't want. And he's going to have to negotiate all that. And so one of the concerns about this new governor is that he doesn't have executive experience. He hasn't held political office. So how is he going to be able to navigate all of those things? He can say what he wants to say, but the governing and how the sausage gets made, in a sense, to use a metaphor, is something different.
But Eric, he spent a great deal of time distancing himself from Donald Trump in his campaign. Is there any concern that was as you said, you'll say what you need to say in order to get into office? Is that a concern?
Well, no, because that's the new strategy, right?
Okay.
So the Republicans across the nation are extremely excited about this red wave that has come through Virginia. Now, I want to caution everyone out there on all sides, and of course, my good friend, independent Dr. Wil LaVeist, that this red wave came at a 2 percentage point, right? So 51-49. That was the spread in all of these statewide offices, right? So that tells us that the demographics is evenly split. However, voter registration, even though you don't register by party here in the Commonwealth, you can, based upon polling questions and in voting history, you can basically, come to a point where you can say this person is a more likely Republican or Democrat voter. With that being the case, there are more voters that are registered or vote Democratic than Republican, right? So what happens is that across the country in these battleground states, now these purple states, it's all about galvanizing your voters and getting to the polls.
But I've heard people say during this election campaign, in particular, that Virginia was a solid blue state.
Yeah.
But has it always been purple, and it was just a little more blue for a little while? I mean, so is this really not that big of a surprise?
Right, and Barbie is exactly right. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And keep in mind, the Republicans have needed some type of positive energy since the Tea Party, right? Keep in mind, Speaker Boehner left Congress because he could not deal with the Tea Party. And that was this undergirding of the Republican Party, which is really the majority that have those beliefs. But then you have that far right that actually started acting on it. Keep in mind, Charlottesville was not that long ago. Keep in mind, January 6th was not that long ago. So that was the really extreme, but the moderates and the career politicians, they really didn't know how to deal with that. Mitch McConnell stuck in there. And I want to say something about Mitch McConnell and compare and contrast him with what's happening in Washington now. Like him, love him, don't like him, don't love him. They get it done, right? They stand shoulder to shoulder. Even if the policy is not good policy, even if it's not something that you would agree with. Strategy-wise, they stand shoulder to shoulder at press conferences, get it done behind closed doors first before coming out into the public to show unity. And that's something that's really hurting the Democratic Party now. You have the progressives, you have the Bernie Sanders, you have the moderates, and then you have others that are just, and then you have Joe Manchin.
So we're doing all the Democrats are doing all the fighting in public. And the Republicans, you saying, are doing their fighting behind closed doors and showing a unified front.
Absolutely.
When they come forward.
Absolutely.
So, and I asked this question to both of you. How interesting is it to you that Winsome Sears, the first woman of color to be elected statewide, and Jason Mayorkas, who is Cuban, so there are two minorities who are Republican, who are in major positions now? Or is the Republican Party starting to pull some more people of color, which is something I know they've been struggling with?
Yeah. I would say absolutely. Because what happens is now you see, and we've talked about this before on your show, you see that these individuals represent black groups or non-white groups that are immigrant to America that come here primarily for, quote unquote, the American dream. So you see Winsome Sears has been a black woman from Jamaican heritage. The new attorney general being of Cuban immigrant heritage, okay, and that's a totally different, when you take a look at Hispanic and Latinx communities, that's a different type of history, because if you look at Miami and South Florida and Castro and all of that, that's a different type of history politically and socially. But they represent that new market for Republicans, for non-whites to come into the party. And they're going to make inroads with that. Also, with the election of the new mayor, I think it's Mayor Wu out of Boston. So the Asian demographics, the black immigrant demographics, and also the Latinx, especially Cuban and those from South American immigrants that are coming to the country are here, but have that heritage. They're going to start recruiting from those demographics because of their focus on economics, education, and community. It more aligns with their views and so forth and policies.
Well,
yeah, I would defer to Eric on how that's playing out in Virginia, and he would know the stats better than I would in terms of demographics and all that. But I caution saying that it's whether or not it's a real movement. I mean, for example, Winsome Sears has actually been around for quite a while and really been working her way up and through the party. So I don't know how much of that has to do with just attracting like new immigrants or something like that, especially when the Republicans have such a nationally have such a negative stance when it comes to immigration, the position on immigration. So I think Eric is right when he talks about these different groups being different. You can't just lump
everybody
people
together.
in. Mm-hmm. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work that way. And so much of what is happening is still regional and still local. I mean, you can say on one hand, oh, the Democrats are in trouble, but then you look in the Northeast and you look at other parts of the country where, significant wins occurred. You got first black mayor in Pittsburgh. You can't talk about black history in America without talking about Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh has just got its first black mayor. So, it just depends. It depends on where you're talking about in the country, and there's a lot to it. I would encourage the research to really parse it out.
Okay.
See what it comes up.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What did you think of the outcome, and where do you think the Commonwealth of Virginia is headed politically from this point? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Let's talk to Nathan in Suffolk. Hi, Nathan. You're on the air.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? It's good to hear from you.
Absolutely. Enjoying the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to pose something that, we only have two official parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, but I think really the largest electorate that we have are those people who are dissatisfied with both Republicans and Democrats, and they're trying to find a place to go and vote, and this time they swung over to the Republican side.
Mm-hmm. So
that would be me. That would be me.
All right, let's get their reaction to that, Nathan. Go ahead, Will.
That came out of nowhere.
I started something.
All right, the bill is in the mail. The check is in the mail, Nathan. It's in the mail. But I think that he is correct. I mean, when you just start to think about how people become part of political parties, and a lot of it has to do with family and culture and different things. But as time goes on, party affiliation loyalties have shifted. There was a time in this country when majority of black people were part of the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. and it was a time when the Democratic Party was the party that that was advocating segregation and lynching black folk. Mm-hmm. And now it has changed. And then you're talking to someone like me who was born and raised in the segregated North. Mm-hmm. And we who were born and raised in the segregated North know that the segregated North in many ways is more racist than the segregated South. So a lot of people, as we have come through our experiences and we're aware and we see how politics plays out locally, yes, there's less loyalty and affinity to a particular party as if, because I think both parties have not done a very good job of addressing the needs, particularly as it pertains to African Americans in recent years. So, yeah, I think that's an element that is definitely there.
So, Eric, why is it that people think that the black community all has to always walk in lockstep? I mean, because think about it, there are white people who are Democrats and there are white people who are Republicans.
Right.
So why do pundits and others look at the black community, in that sense? That if they're not all voting, one party, meaning Democrat for right now, that there's a problem.
Well, Barbara, I think that's always been an issue, and I think because we share a similar history, and we also share similar living areas, and demographics and where we live. Well, geographic areas where we live, and that was our history, right? So we're all coming out of that system of segregation, right? Mm-hmm. But as time has moved, more African Americans have different experiences. They're not the same experiences. it's different. And we talk about that as we raise our kids. Like some of our kids go to private schools, some go to parochial schools, some go to mixed public schools, some go to public schools in areas that they're not performing too well. And even though we may share similar history, over the course of time, you end up having different experiences, so therefore you see the world a different way, right? So based upon the caller, Nathan, and what Will stated, which he's like, that's me all the way. People are gravitating toward, a message that fits more or less their experience and lifestyle. And to that point, I think it is a disadvantage for all of us, especially with freedom of speech, for us to disparage others that think differently from us. And I think that's a problem in our current culture across the board. Listen, you may believe what you believe. That's fine. I respect that. But you also have to respect me and what I believe. And then we all come together. We all go to the same restaurants and eat. We all go to the same games and cheer up for our team. And we all go to the same stores, shop at the same stores. But, and we all respect each other in our public spaces. So I think that narrative is going to change, and I think that's the next swing of this pendulum of change that we're seeing.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the results of Virginia's 2021 elections with Dr. Eric Claville, political analyst, public policy expert, and director of the Center for African American Public Policy at Norfolk State University, and Dr. Wil LaVeist, author, journalist, political pundit, and media consultant. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Let's talk to Ray in Virginia Beach. Hi, Ray. You're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I was watching the PBS NewsHour last night, and James Carville was on there. I don't know if anybody watched that or not, but he made sort of a statement that I found on the internet this morning, and I thought I'd read it. And then I'm not going to say this is me. I just want to see what your guests there think about what he said. And he's a Clinton guy, so we'll see what happens here. He said, "What went wrong is stupid wokeness. Don't just look at Virginia and New Jersey. Look at Long Island, Buffalo, Minneapolis, and even Seattle. I mean, this defund the police lunacy and taking Lincoln's name off schools, people see that, and it really has a suppressive effect all across the country on Democrats. Some of these people need to go to a woke detox center or something." He added, "We got to change this, and not about changing dictionaries, change laws." So that's what he said. So I just want to hear your comments on that.
Okay, thanks, Ray, for the call. Eric?
Yeah, I actually saw that those comments by James Carville. And keep in mind, James Carville is a very colorful character.
Yes, he is.
He is the Raging Cajun, and of course, I've known James Carville for a long time because, of course, that's my home state and around the political arena. So, with that, that is the sentiment of the established Democratic Party. That's their belief. And I will also say, he's talking about the extreme of the Democratic Party. Likewise, behind closed doors, and some have come out publicly, like Liz Cheney and others, that's the sentiment around those who are the extreme of the Republican Party. You have some members that are there that they're like, please stop talking. Please stop doing that. You're killing us here. So again, that's how the establishment views that. And again, it's that major swing. The reason why persons can say that and focus on this election is because those traumatic events that we saw in 2020, we don't see those in 2021 anymore. They're still there. We're looking at the trial of Ahmaud Arbery, and of course, the George Floyd trial was finished, and persons believe that justice was definitely met in that trial. So we don't see that, play out. But if these things were still playing out, James Carville couldn't make those statements because individuals would still be like, oh my goodness, we got to get this right. So you always have an extreme reaction to an event, and then ultimately it settles in the middle because you get another extreme reaction to the reaction of that event. So we're at a point now where we have to start to settle in the middle and come to a point where, okay, This was extreme thought from here. This extreme thought from here. Where do we settle in the middle and then move forward? So I believe that's the point where we're at.
Well, is there anything you want to add to that? Our phone lines are lit up, by the way, so we're going to take some calls in just a minute. But did you want to add?
Yeah, I want to leave space for the callers to call in. But I mean, okay. I would agree that that's a strategic messaging going on by Claville to speak to the internal battle that they're having. And I would say to Claville, if your establishment approach has been working, then why are we where we're at now? If it has been working, what are you talking about? So at some point, that's what it comes down to, is people already established in power want to maintain that and want to maintain that influence, and they want to ward off, any newcomers who are coming with a different voice to bringing along the people who the establishment has ignored. Right. So that's what that is to me.
Okay, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. If you get a busy signal, call right back because we're rolling through some calls here. Carol joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Carol. You're on the air.
Hi. I'm a lifelong Democrat, and the minute the Republicans nominated Glenn Youngkin, I was concerned. He seemed like such a down-to-earth guy, especially in his fleece vest. But I think Terry McAuliffe really shot himself in the foot with the education comment that he made. And I didn't think there was a chance he was going to win after that.
After that comment was made. Okay, thanks so much for the call, Carol. Eric, that education, that seems to be the thing that really made the difference.
That was it. And to the caller's point, Glenn Youngkin represents that guy next door that every, parent wants their daughter to marry, right? It's just that kind of clean-cut look and non-threatening and just personable, very personable type of guy, very successful in business.
How much is he worth?
Right.
Yeah. Very next door to who? Does he live next door to?
Very well. When he started out, Will, right? But very unassuming, very personable, and no political baggage, right? So all of that, plays in. And the state, but again, McAuliffe was ahead by 9 to 10 percentage points. Even with all that, it shrank just a little to 7, closer to the debate, but he was still up. It was the comment on education and the Youngkin campaign being able to create messaging around that. So it's not just a statement, but it's creating messages. Youngkin made statements too, of course, with the abortion piece and Trump and so forth. But the messaging didn't stick, right? They really didn't create that messaging because those are like Trump is so yesterday. Politics changes quickly. I mean, so many,
and there was a lot of trying to push Youngkin as a Trump person as opposed to sticking with the issues. Did that have anything to do with it also in terms of the messaging?
It fell flat because
exactly.
Yeah, it fell flat because here's the deal, Will. You and I, we talked about this. I mean, basically, he's a sweater vest guy, right? Sweater vest, kind of a Mr. Rogers. Won't you live in my neighborhood? If you can get into that neighborhood, that type of thing. So it fell flat because he didn't have that extreme rhetoric. Talks to everybody, greets everybody. Again, even keel. The whole nine, and he just had that trust factor that a lot of people that voted for Biden, again, that swung that election. So you know what? I'm going to try this guy out, and that's what happened.
So, Will, speaking of image, in New York City, the second African American to become mayor of the city in your city in New York, and the New York Times did an entire piece. His name is Eric Adams, and they did an entire piece on his wardrobe and how he dresses. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that, as opposed to an entire piece on maybe his policy or what it is that he plans to get done for the city of New York.
I said earlier in the show, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, in the segregated North. And so here we are. I was there when we voted for David Dinkins, first black man, And I remember vividly the excitement around that and how important it was in the city, which is a very racially polarized city and still is. Mm-hmm. And so here we come, the second black mayor, and the New York Times has to find another way to say, hey, you got a black mayor. And it's like I immediately thought about how Michelle Obama was so scrutinized in her appearance, again, as a black woman. So it's a very, subtle, not so subtle for us that can pick up on it immediately, but it's a way of, again, can't get past the fact that he is a black male. So so instead of doing a piece that talks about variety of candidates and how clothes is used to exude power, because it's not that that's untrue, but why wouldn't you talk about all of the many candidates who and how they dress and how they project? But no, we got to focus on him specifically. Again, it's just again tone deaf, which you often see coming out of the North, and this perception that the North is not racist and white liberals are not racist. And for those of us who lived our lives in that, we know that we deal with these kinds of issues daily, and it's a shame. I also want to point out too, there's also a shame that Winsome Sears, she's the first black woman that was won a statewide office. Mm-hmm. You're not hearing that much about that. And again, when you talk about where people are, what party they are in, we put ourselves in these boxes. But she should be celebrated for that, as well as it should be acknowledged that why did it take so long for a black woman to be recognized? Why did it take so long for Eric Adams to become the second mayor? I mean, but instead we get a long piece about how he dresses.
Yeah, and it was.
That's just showing you the racism.
Yeah, it was very in depth. I actually was trying to remember or to look to see whether or not there were other people. And you're right, Michelle Obama was the only other one that really popped up that received that exact same kind of scrutiny about clothing as opposed to what is going on with them politically. Did you want to respond, Eric, before I move on?
No, I like I said, Will knows New York, but I think it is a symptom of, can these people really contribute to real policy change and how we view these individuals? I said from the very beginning, I think that the White House really underutilized Michelle Obama, that represented an educated, Ivy League educated black woman with children, raising children, married, come from the traditional African-American family, blue-collar workers. That was a phenomenal story within itself. But every time you saw her, they talked about her fashion. She was dancing.
Or she was angry.
Or angry. Yeah. And I just thought it was just a really, really bad, really a big mistake and missing opportunity.
Okay, let's go to Nancy in Virginia Beach. Hi, Nancy. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara. Thank you for having me.
Uh-huh.
I just was listening to your conversation, and I do love your show.
Thank you.
I was just, I'm listening to these people, in Youngkin and whatnot, and I keep coming back. I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I can't vote for a Republican. After the insurrection, I don't think we're really addressing the fact that this is not a Republican Party that we're dealing with. And Youngkin pandered to the Trump type of a Republican very hard. He did the CRT lie, which is how he got past the education idea. So I'm dismayed to hear a couple other people say, yeah, that's where I went because, whatever. But these aren't Republicans. I just want to remind people, this has become something else. And the Republicans that may or may not, agree with all this pandering and all this craziness on this new Trump side have stood in lockstep still. So they're not trustworthy. And that's kind of where I was going with that.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy, for the call. Will, since you were the one who said that was me, you want to respond to Nancy?
No, I respect her, her point of view and understand the frustration. But I would also say that I remember covering President Obama's first election. and that he was coming on the heels of a Republican, a traditional, Republican that she would probably, in Bush, she wouldn't be happy with all his policies, but she would say, okay, that's a sensible Republican. And the fact of the matter is, as I alluded to earlier, is that what these sensible Republicans or sensible Democrats have been doing previously was not working for a large segment of this population. And that's where you've gotten these other movements of people who have felt left out, disenfranchised, ignored, and just overrun. And the fact of the matter is that people need to come to grips with some of the people who are out there in that insurrection also at one point voted for President Obama. I know that's a shock to a lot of people, but it's true. There's a lot of people who are out there who once voted for a person that they thought was going to take them in a direction and pay attention to their issues.
So, Will, are you saying that basically then that people are struggling and trying to grab hold to whomever they think is going to make their life better and change things and actually make it happen? And they'll keep doing it until they find the person.
Yep.
Wow.
There you go.
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, Will is exactly right, because we saw, we saw the swing from the Bush administration over to Obama, right? Because they said, hey, I believe what he can do. But then after that first term, they're like, well, I'm going to try this guy, Romney, because, Obama didn't do X, Y, Z. And then they said, well, we're going to try Trump because Obama still hasn't did X, Y, Z for us on the ground level. And I think this is something when you take a look at the national issues that we're having, because I also said that, Youngkin cracked the Trump code, right? He cracked the code. This is a new strategy, a new type of candidate that the GOP are going to try to copy in 2022 midterms. And the Democratic Party here in the state, they're kind of shook a little bit because you got 2022 and 2024 coming up. So you got control of the Senate, and then you got the U.S. Senator election, you got the U.S. Congress election, and then you also have the presidential election. And then 2025 right after that. So it's one thing to lose one race or maybe one office, but to lose all of them and then flip the House, that's a shellacking, right? So what is that messaging that now you can create in order to say, hey, we're going to actually get things done? But it's not just the messaging. It's getting things passed. We're fighting now over a few $100 million, which is not a lot of money on the large scale, about paid family leave from one senator that says, and his state needs it, right? About paid family.
That's the piece that really
paid family. 1.75.
His state needs it. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
That's the thing that is so baffling about all of that to me. His state needs it, and he won't.
$1.75 trillion. That is like, we're never gonna. You can't even make that money. You can't pay it back.
Is that and people are saying that is part of the reason why McAuliffe lost also. Is that really, because that's national. That's not Virginia. But is that the reason why?
Well, Northern Virginia is the suburbs of D.C., right? And we're intricately connected. But the further you move away from D.C. coming south, no, it didn't really affect. But it affected the enthusiasm. But it's but it's what's happening, right? They talk, we're going to forgive student loans. They get into office. Well, I don't know if I can do it or not. I'm going to kick it over to the Department of Education, see if I can actually do it. And Congress is like, you can do 50,000. I'll do 10, but I don't know if I could do it, right? But we'll see what happens. And it's like, no, you can't do that. There are certain things that you come in day one and say, okay, just like Obama with the Lilly Ledbetter Act. The court ruled against it. He got sworn in. Went down, signed that into law. Bam, that's great. Ronald Reagan did it when the first executive order, he removed the solar panels that Jimmy Carter installed at the top of the White House. He showed his allegiance to big oil. Now, of course, we're paying for a lot of that now. But again, these are the things that you do to show that allegiance and get it done to the voters.
Let's go to Martha in Norfolk. Hi, Martha. You're on the air.
Hi, thank you. This election seemed like another time where the Democratic Party pulled the stunt of having too many people run for office, for the same office. So here we had 4 or 5 people running for governor. which resulted in pockets of enthusiasm for each person. Like, I knew a number of people, and I was one of them, that was helping out with Jennifer Carol Foy's run, and then each person just gets chunks of votes, but those people have no chance when you've got the party promoting McAuliffe, the establishment guide, a known quantity. And I would love to see the party just say, okay, we're going to coalesce behind somebody new and exciting and get that enthusiasm. And the only way that's going to happen is if these guys, generally white male establishment characters, decide to back off and give it a shot.
Okay, thanks, Martha, for the call. Again, that enthusiasm, stop segregating, stop sectioning, not segregating, but sectioning people and sectioning the vote.
Well, there's one school of thought that believes that, having multiple candidates challenge for a seat is good because it creates enthusiasm, right? At the same time, it's not so much what happens during the primary, but what happens after the primary. You got a lot of those candidates that were in the primary that it was hard to coalesce them around this candidate, and that I think that kind of hurt a lot. I mean, you had some very popular candidates: Jennifer Carol Foy, you had Senator Jennifer McClellan, and you had Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax.
Andrea McClellan.
Yeah, Andrea McClellan. I'm sorry. And you had Lieutenant Governor Fairfax, right? Well, Senator McClellan, who's running for governor. Andrea ran for
that's right,
Lieutenant Governor.
Lieutenant Governor.
So,
right.
So you had to, and also for LG, right? And we know it's lower office, but they have community impact, right? So the inability to really coalesce those individuals, say, hey, get on board, and maybe a secretary position, that type of thing. You know how these things go. But none of that really happened, and those candidates didn't get out in the forefront early enough, often enough to be able to do that because it just wasn't a thing.
Let me ask you a question too. Four of the members of the Legislative Black Caucus also did not get voted back in.
That is correct.
Right? What impact is that going to have?
Tremendous. That's true. I mean, you lose 4 seats. Of course, control of the House is in jeopardy here, but also the strength of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, which has worked really hard in the last years to really push a lot of good policies. But that's a major hit.
Okay, let's go to Sharice in Norfolk. Hi, Sharice. You're on the air.
Hi there, Barbara. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Sure.
I wanted to let you know that I feel that individuals who are going out and voting for a party and saying they're lifelong Democrats, and this is pretty much what the gentleman, I believe his name's Wil, said, and you seconded his that. People need to understand the parties are very morphed, both of them. They're full of extremists, but the extremists become the voices instead of the people who are more composite of what the parties represent. And I don't vote my party all the time. As a matter of fact, I haven't voted my party in too many things in several years because of extremism in certain areas. So with all that being said, people have got to be educated to look at the individual and not just walk into
not just the party,
the voting poll and say whatever they've been handed outside and say, okay, this is who I'm going to vote for.
Got you. Okay. Thanks, Sharice. I appreciate that. And I mean, she's right. The beauty of it is that people have choice.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yep.
Absolutely. Let's go to Kathy in Norfolk. Hi, Kathy. You're on the air.
Hello, Barbara, and hello, Dr. Claville. I'm actually a professor of exercise science at Norfolk State. So I see Dr. Claville regularly. I just wanted to say I was completely devastated and slightly depressed yesterday. One of my good friends lost to a crazy Republican in District 83, Nancy Guy, lost to Tim Anderson. But I didn't call about that. I just wanted to get your feel for Winsome Sears, how you think she might govern. Would she maybe offset some of the heavy-duty conservatism? Or anyway, I just wanted to get y'all's
cut on her.
Thank you. And we got about 3 minutes left in the show. So
yeah. So I know everyone remembers the photo of her holding, the semi-automatic rifle. Of course, she's a former Marine.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of individuals who are former military, are champion Second Amendment rights. So, but I think she represents a lot more of African American traditional values than we give her credit for. But as it relates to the party, conservative, I think she's going to toe that line as well. But at the end of the day, lieutenant governors have very little power influence, but they do preside over the Senate.
And she could be the swing vote, could she not?
Absolutely.
With the Senate, because because of how tight the margin is. Correct. In terms of Democrats over Republicans in who holds the power in the Senate.
And the Senate may flip as well in the next election. So this is something that we all got to take a look at.
Will, your thoughts on Winsome?
Yeah, I agree. I think she's going to toe the party line. Hopefully she will, get some funding, fair funding, maximum funding for HBCUs and other institutions or issues that will affect Black people in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
5 seconds.
Sure.
Real quick.
Ahead. You got time.
And to Will's point, both Glenn Youngkin and Winsome Sears each have proclaimed they're going to fully support all HBCUs in the state. So we will see.
Okay, last thought, Will, I'm going to start with you. So the election's over. What do the Democrats need to do? One thing right now to start getting ready for the next go-round.
Get some creativity.
That's short and sweet, right?
Yeah.
Oh, guys, that is Dr. Wil LaVeist, and he is an author, journalist, political media consultant, and political analyst. Will, thank you. It is always a pleasure to have you, and we appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. Eric, you get the last word. What do they need to do?
Yeah, so I think that they have to go back to their bread and butter. Grassroots organizing, grassroots campaigning, grassroots voter registration, and continue to build that excitement. And for creativity purposes, create voting campaigns around early voting every weekend. Let's target a different demographics on Sundays. Let's do a different souls to the polls push, those type of things, and really look at their candidates and the issues, not all the issues that they're championing, but what are those 1, 2, maybe 3 that you can really champion and draw people in and get it done day one.
And you and Will have a podcast. Tell people where they can find it.
Yeah, so you can go to LaVeist and Claville. That's LaVeist and Claville. We do have a podcast together that we've been doing for over a year. We're in our second season, and we're having a great time.
Okay, and that is on YouTube or anywhere you can find your
anywhere you can find your podcast.
Find your podcast.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very, very much. We appreciate you being here,
Thank you
Dr.
so much.
Eric LaVille. Lots of good information in today's show. So do me a favor and share this show with a friend. You can find the podcast for this show and all of our shows at anotherviewradio.org. And while you're there, please sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. Now, I think I told you guys a while ago, we lost our entire base, and we have been trying ever since to rebuild the base. So we're slowly coming back up, but we really could use your help. So if you go to anotherviewradio.org, make and select the fact that you'd like to get the newsletter, that would be great. So I'm signed up to get my booster shot next Thursday, right after the show. So let me ask you a question. Have you gotten your booster shot? What about your flu shot? And it's hard for me to fathom, but there's still those of you out there who have not gotten your first vaccine. So the holidays are upon us. Don't you want to be with family and friends in a safe environment? Then do your part. Go get your shot. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Stay safe, everyone, and join us again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Thomas Nelson Community College, now becoming Virginia Peninsula Community College. the first choice, whether starting your bachelor's degree or advancing your career. More at tncc.edu.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.